Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women, and today we're talking about women's economic progress and development. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Dr. Harbeen Arora. She's a speaker, educationist, philanthropist, spiritualist, author, entrepreneur, and businesswoman. Harbeen is the global chairperson of the All Ladies League and also the Women's Economic Forum, as well as Chancellor of 2 universities, so lots of experience. Welcome to the programme, Harbeen.
Thank you, Anna. Really delighted to be with you, and I want to congratulate you, first of all, for this brilliant initiative, which is also a very caring and healing initiative, I believe, because as women, when we learn about other inspirational women who have said yes to life with positivity and initiative and enthusiasm and all that we know of that constitutes inspiration, I think it heals a lot within us as well, and it's very important to do what you're doing. It's people talk about a lot of big institutional, legislational, policy level changes, but I think this persuasive change that you're bringing about by bringing heartfelt stories to light to share with the world, rest of the world, women, men, young people, everyone. I think I am grateful to you for that, and I'm sure a lot of women, a lot of listeners who tune into your program feel the same way.
Thank you very much, Harbeen. That's lovely. I do hope that everyone's enjoying it because we try, and you're right. I know a lot of women have said that they find it really supportive and encouraging when they can hear other women and other women's experience. It makes them feel more courageous, more together. So, but I know you particularly, you've dedicated yourself to women's empowerment and particularly to women's economic development. So what progress have you seen in general worldwide over the last 50 to 100 years?
Well, actually, I think we are the whole movement of change is in continuity. And we have to, of course, look at the history of the movement. And 2017 is quite a remarkable year because it's a 100-year milestone moment. With 1917, there were, rights for the suffragist movement was in its throes. And in New York, women got the right to vote in the state, and then it led to 1920, and so on and so forth. The women's, the universal adult suffrage, where every woman, regardless of the conditions that were put earlier, whether she would own a property or a husband would allow, or things like that, regardless of any condition, every woman, as much as another man, would have the right to vote. And I think that's been a very important contribution of the past 100 or 50 years, the development of women's right to vote. Yes. And in terms of technologies, as women went out, those were the years of the war. So as the men were out at the frontiers, women had to become part of the economic activity. And somewhere that had to do with the awakening that happened in terms of women's rights. Including women's reproductive rights. The whole question of our rights over our bodies began with that, and then the contraceptive pill came, and things happened. So definitely, it's the past 100 years, if you see, have been so full of this whole movement of women becoming aware of their rights and marching ahead singularly and collectively and making changes happen. So it's a good time to reflect, and it's good that you asked that question because we are now exactly celebrating 100 years of that movement in 2017. So yes, certainly there's been a lot, yet there are quite a few miles to go before we sleep. So a lot has been done, but a lot needs to be done yet.
And so do you think a lot of it was really linked to getting the vote, or do you think there's other benefits, other advantages, other ways that have helped it to happen? Because I know you said that the vote, more or less, suffrage was about 100 years ago, but there were some countries that started giving women the vote 200 and 300 years ago. For example, Sweden originally, they granted the vote in 1718. And in fact, there were several countries that gave women the vote in the 1700s, but then they were later rescinded, which I think is really strange. And then in the 1800s, they granted the vote to landowning women or women paying taxes. For example, Australia in 1861, and yet and New Zealand, I think, in 1893. But they're not necessarily countries that are known to be very forward-thinking today in some areas, although in others they're excellent. So do you think that's made a big difference? And for example, the Nordic countries, which now are a shining light for diversity and for women's equality. So how do you think that's impacted everything?
Well, I think there are quite a few layers to what you just mentioned. So, number one on, women's right to vote, whether that has a role to play in the empowerment of women. Well, certainly, political representation is one of the pillars of empowerment, and the right to vote gives you that very right to be out there. In a vibrant democracy, for it to be called a democracy, it is vital that both halves of the population, the people, the citizenry are going to participate in a democratic way, in an equal way, in a balanced way. So for that, women's right to vote is very important, because it also, on the governance side, it's important. When we talk of inclusion, it's, you're including the very populace you seek to serve. So women in the political field, when they get the right to vote, they are engaged in the political process. They want to run for office, and there are empirical studies done on that, how women would like to run for office, take positions in legislatures or wherever, public office, national office, whichever. They aspire to positions of national and at national level or policy level. So that is absolutely a critical element of the empowerment process. The second part is, that there were countries before 1917 that also in a limited way started giving women the right to vote. I mean, there are layers of that, but the whole point of it was always dependent on something linked to the patriarchal system as well. It was never quite for the woman, for the agency, the independent agency that she represented. I mean, you talk about Sweden or Nordic countries. I mean, unfortunately, the witch trials were just like 100 years or 150 years before what you mentioned, they gave limited rights. So things are very layered and very complicated, but yes, we have to get to universal adult suffrage without any conditions involved whatsoever. And I think in that, there's a long way to go. There are many countries still where these rights of women are not given as inalienable. They are still conditional, and I think there's a march to go ahead, just where universal adult suffrage and getting that right to vote unconditionally, recognizing women as equal partners in the democratic processes is concerned, because democracy as such is a question mark in many countries at the moment. So there are very many layers. The third aspect that you mentioned about the Nordic countries being the shining example in this light, well, certainly I would agree. In fact, we have our Women Economic Forum coming up in Iceland, which is like the number one country, which is, in many studies, they say the best country to live in for women. Having said that, while they do give, they have a lot of institutional policies, external policies that give you, equal rights and empowerment. And different countries in the Nordic region have done, differently, representation on boards or women representation in parliament and all of that. At the same time, something called the Nordic paradox as well, which is again not peculiar to the Nordics. It's actually quite a global pandemic, which is violence against women. In fact, Nordic countries sometimes show the higher rates of violence against women, particularly intimate partner violence. And sometimes those rates are higher than what one would observe in the rest of Europe, while though some say it might be because women have become more vocal and they're reporting it more and they're talking about it more. So even if it's the same or less, the fact is that it hasn't quite gone away with these external institutional mechanisms. So yes, it's a vital part, but there are other elements involved in fuller empowerment, and I'm hoping that we will go through in the next part of your interview over some of the other areas.
I know one of the other questions, because as you've dedicated so much time to this, and with the Women's Economic Forum, you really do get in-depth detail and analysis. So what do you consider other restrictions that currently exist on women's economic development?
Well, there are many that I could count, but the most important couple of them I'd like to count is, one is the mindset. And we are dealing with blocks in the mindset within ourselves, because we also as women inherit patriarchal narratives. We don't even realize to what extent we sometimes internalize them. So for women to find their own narrative, their own voice, and their own unique regard, which is their own, and not quite received from mindsets around, which often go in the name of culture, which is there to an extent, but sort of have your own thinking on it. What do you think of it? What is your perspective? And that is a process of education, awareness, and awakening, and it passes through many different you have to be exposed to different things for all of it to come together. And a bit of it, that's what we are trying to do at the Women Economic Forum. Of course, the economic part of it, but the economic part, it's like a bonfire you've put out there. You've set all the wood and everything stacked together, but it needs that combustible material, that matchstick or that light, to come and light it up, to use a metaphor, and that light, that combustible material, is the mindset of the person who is going to use those elements, those 7 colors, to make a painting, so to say, right? And how do you awaken that mindset? So when we do the Women Economic Forum, we knew that we didn't want to create another conference. We wanted to create something that women would connect with, and women would get awakened with, inspired by, and want to go out and light that bonfire. So the spirit in the forum is very, it's full of celebration. So it's not about, you don't have to look serious, because why does a conference have to be serious? So the idea is to create the feminine narrative and tell women it's okay to be you. And people ask me, what's the dress code for the conference? And I tell them, whatever celebrates you. If you want to wear a pantsuit, go ahead. If you want to wear a dress, go ahead. Whatever, do you want to wear a traditional sari? Go ahead. You want to wear a, whatever. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel you, more of you. Please do that, And I've had women from the corporate field, there have been so many, of testimonials, so to say, where some things like, I just didn't feel the corporate stress that goes around, the whole conference thing, and that's been very important, because that's what sort of you draw the women in. And there are women who would sort of say, well, I'm a painter, but this economic thing, I don't know, I just paint, so like, look, you're a painter and you can monetize it, and it can also be an economic activity for you. And so and slowly they would get drawn in, because they would always say, but I don't work, I'm not a professional, I'm not a businesswoman. So the whole idea is to create an enabling, awakened place of celebration for all women from all walks of life, whether you're a Forbes listed businesswoman,
Yes.
or you're an artist, or you're a sports person, or you run a self-help group in a village, or you're a homemaker, or anybody, as long as you're a woman.
Yes.
And you want to do something, and you want to find yourself and figure out what to do with your life. We create a psychic ecosystem in addition to the concrete ecosystem in terms of how to start a business, where to get the funding, and the networking that goes with it, but never without the spirit. This whole spirit is very important. And I always say spirit before the size, because spirit is like the soul. And if you've got the soul and the intent and this whole spirit right, then the rest of it is going to follow, because you're going to be inspired to seek it out. And we've also created an ecosystem where you can meet a lot of people, you will meet a lot of people, and the networking is not going to feel like serious networking in some sort of card exchanging way, which is also important, but in a friendly way, where you don't even know where the networking begins and ends, because you just feel very connected as women, irrespective of which country, language, culture, color you come from.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's a bit of the mindset part of what I was saying, which we need. Yeah. And the second, in the way we function, it sort of flows automatically, is the sisterhood part. I mean, when you mentioned about the women's right to vote, I think of the time when it happened in the UK, and when India was under the British rule, there were women who were initially I guess the first batch of women parliamentarians who sent in recommendations and letters and wrote letters and were connected with women in India and working together to find the same sort of empowerment for them, get them similar rights, Yeah. And I call that the sisterhood, the movement where there was this example where somebody was sharing about when initially women wanted to get into this was the Finance Women's Association in New York. And the history of that is that there were 8 women who wanted to join the Young Men Investment Association or something like that, and they were refused entry. And so these 8 women just turned around and said, well, we are going to form the Young Women's Investment Association, which now has a great history. They're spread all over the world, and that's it, and contributing and leading to women's economic empowerment. So these 8 women who decided to work together, we call that the sisterhood, or women who decided to stand up for each other and just with each other. And it's really not about marching ahead in some sort of saying, it's again not that harsh feminist tinge to it, which a lot of women sort of don't want to don't identify with anymore. When we ask about, are you a feminist, they say, well, not in the very aggressive of military way. So the coming together for us is not that either. It's not about, if I believe in something, then 7 of you or 10 of you have to say yes to it and march with me. It's not about that. It's about connection. It's about feeling for each other and knowing that as women, we are women's best friends. Unfortunately, what has gone around and what we have received is women are women's worst enemies. And in today's time, with so much happening with technology, communication, so much within our reach today, I think we've got to make that quantum leap of women are women's best friends, and our daughters actually can grow up believing that rather than otherwise. And so, those are the 2 things I feel very strongly about. And I think those 2 things are critical to our economic success, without which empowerment would absolutely be incomplete, because it is the lack of economic means that renders women very, very vulnerable to all kind of exploitative and oppressive forces that go around.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
Have you noticed any differences in the approach to progress and development in different regions in the world? Because I know the Women's Economic Forum is all over the world, so you've had the chance to really investigate everywhere. Are some areas particularly good or bad, or have a totally different view?
With women, I guess it's all over the world. Somebody was saying to me the other day that when you start traveling the world, you go to about 20 countries, 25 countries, and you are constantly discovering how different everyone is, right? The culture is different, the language is different, everything's different. And at some point, you cross into the 35th country or the 40th country, and then it begins to dawn on you actually how similar we are.
Yes.
And that how much we are all the same.
Yeah.
And it doesn't quite change.
Yes.
I think the same would be true for, women's challenges or, the status of women's empowerment in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
There are differences in the emphasis that is being placed on different things. So in some places you would have, by law, something, which is there for you, yet the mindset is lagging behind. In some places, the women's movement is very strong, yet the laws and the legislation are not really responding. So the challenges could be different in their details in different regions, but the sum total, the outcome of all of it is that we are held back.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much the same. And we can sort of bypass that, which, by creating the highway of sisterhood, as I call.
Yeah.
Because when you really want to help each other, and that's why at our forum we always say there are just very few rules, which is simply bring in positivity and no arguments over religion or politics or anything. We're here as women and sisters with a wish and will to help each other, and by doing that help ourselves and help society around us, because I don't need to kind of persuade anyone about the fact how important it is to society to have a woman empowered, because one woman empowered is a whole society empowered, a whole family, a whole community. So I won't belabor that point too much because we all share that understanding. But the fact that, if we are, as women, we understand our issues and we understand each other's issues. So again, that we've got all the understanding, we've got all the knowledge. All we need to do is pool in our strengths, pool in our skills, and just start helping each other, and knowing fully well that as I expand that space of empowering whoever it is around me, that whole empowering space is going to expand and shine on me back as much. It's going to come back to me.
Yeah.
And having just that faith and going on. And every day, again, there are, little moments of magic and miracles that are happening all around. And that's what we are doing with the All Ladies League, which is the master network, which is the sisterhood network.
Yeah.
And we've got about 500 circles of self-help or sisterhood around, where we actually feel the ethos that if all of us decide to pitch in and pull in our strengths and skills with a soulful spirit, well, we can do it all. Some person is working in the ministry, another person is working in business, another is, in the field somewhere, another is, there's always something you can bring. Think of it as a potluck lunch. There's always something you can bring.
Yeah. And for me, it's ideal to have open choice and respect for everybody, but also with successful integration and cooperation between both sexes. So what do you think we can do to best promote this so that women really do achieve true freedom as well as equality and empowerment and economic development, but without then causing discrimination the other way? So not by going to extremes and then impinging on men's rights, but having real equality for everybody.
Well, we have a long way to go towards that, impinging on men's rights. But I understand totally what you're saying, and in fact, in the East, where I come from, this is very fundamental, and this is what sort of differentiates the Eastern feminism, if I could use a word like that, is that women do not, family is very, very important in India or, the subcontinent here.
Yes.
If you go to Japan or in the east part, family is very, very important. And keeping the family together for a woman, that's that's her pride, keeping everybody together. And in India we have joint families as well, so it's the women who've actually kept together families forever, right? So that role is very, very important to women. And so it's what you said about not alienating anybody and not sort of making it a fight of women versus men. It's sort of culturally very ingrained here. And I won't go into the spiritual aspect, let's say, especially in India, it's goddess worshipping culture. So there are all sorts of things. So for women over here, what you said is very, very important. Having said that, I would also like to share with you my experience of having met a lot of wonderful men, supportive men. Some of them also call themselves supported men, giving the compliment back to the women for supporting them. At the same time, there are a lot of silent biases. So, for instance, if it's a conference and women are outside having, the sessions going inside, and some women are outside, which would be because we are wanting to meet each other, network with each other. And if you have some men who are actually, and this has come from some very senior people as well, who are heads of very large organizations, the silent sort of, and sometimes it is articulated like that as well, is you sort of think, why aren't women sitting in the session? They are wasting their time outside, right? Whereas if it's the boys standing outside, if it's the men standing outside, then obviously they're at work and they're networking, which is serious business, right? So there are these silent biases all the time, and maybe sometimes men don't even realize that these are biases, just as sometimes as women we also don't realize when we are internalizing biases which are actually very patriarchal biases, and we women do that all the time as well. I've heard some biases from women which are very with and again, that's why I say awakening, because I'm sure a few years back I had the same biases, things like if there was an incident, if somebody assaulted somebody on the street at 10 p.m. at night, the first question even women would tend to ask is, what was she doing out at 10 p.m. at night? So there are these biases which are everywhere. So again, this is not to sort of point the finger at men or women, but to say that these biases exist, recognize them as there again. And again, it's going to be a long process. And the good part is that in our forums, we don't invite men just like that. Of course, we invite leaders who are, CEOs or whatever, or entrepreneurs who are doing something or want to share about their work. But in general, invitation to men is by reference of the women. So we have, absolutely. So if you would be coming to the forum as a delegate or as a speaker, as a participant, then you would have to tell me, Harbeen, I'd like to invite, my brother or my friend or this person who I know, or my son or my husband, and then they are most welcome. But otherwise, it's even to women, it's by invitation, and to men more so, I guess.
That's good. And I know constructive change obviously needs to happen at all levels. And
yes, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing when we've seen some of the spouses who've come, the brothers who've come, and it's been a liberating experience, frankly, for them as well. You can see a change at the end. The annual event is for 6 days in India, and the regional events are 2 days in different parts of the world throughout the year. And especially at the annual event, because it's like a week, you stay, you listen to the women, you begin to understand. And the way we do the conference is, please don't bring in PPTs because we can Google them, but bring your energy, your story, because we can't find that on Google. So bring yourself, bring your spirit, bring your energy and your heartfelt story. Now they're calling it the human library concept as well, which is mining into all the knowledge and insights which are there in every human being, right? So when you listen to somebody who's Forbes listed, but not a presentation about her business, but about who she is as a woman and how she reached where she did with all the struggles and challenges and how she overcame, you can actually access inspiration. And even if she's an Arab woman and you're not, it doesn't matter, because in that particular moment, you're united by your challenges and you're united by your dreams and aspirations. So it's very, very beautiful. And when men listen to that as well, perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to just listen to that. And the fact that a businesswoman who's reached somewhere is saying all of that lends it a lot more gravitas and weight, and increases their receptivity to what is being said. Maybe the same thing would have been said by somebody around him, but now the fact that somebody who's an achiever is saying that, makes it so much more acceptable, so to say.
Exactly.
Because it puts it in a certain context for the person. That it's just not like that. It's it must be meaning something. So and I've seen like a whole lot of, it's again, men start speaking about themselves because frankly we put a lot of frames and put men in the boxes as well. And they're supposed to be the breadwinners. If you are a stay-at-home dad, then you're a loser, so to say. Things like that. So I think we bind the men as well. And so for whoever wants to kind of step into that space of respect for women, welcome. And then whatever they want to receive, then they're like our brothers, So as women, as mothers, we have daughters and we have sons, and so we are equally concerned about an awakened life for both.
So how do you think we can foster constructive change in our personal and professional life, as well as in businesses and organizations? Because everyone at the moment really focuses very much on doing it in business and organizations, but not so much with the personal aspect or the individual professional life. Have you any advice for that?
Well, I totally agree with you. It's all connected. And that's why when we do our forum, the Women Economic Forum, if you go through the 500 sessions that are, discussed over the 6 days, over 50 different areas, it's not just the business, finance, and the technical parts of it. It's also about the human part of who you are, because you, the person, are at the source of everything. You are going to create whatever you do in your business, in your family, in your relationships. So it's all coming from you. So you need to be healthy and whole, and you need to be healed as well. And I think for women, it's very, very important, because there are statistics to show what a large percentage, easily 80% of women who would be in a sample group would have some story to tell about a sexual abuse they went through, or they witnessed, or they know about that happened to somebody. I mean, there's so much fragmentation in our inner worlds, in our spirits, and a lot needs to be healed. So I think that safe, supportive spaces are very much required for women to first get healed and heal their traumas, and not sort of perpetuate them, or not sort of be in that negative feedback loop. I think we need to sort of come out, and only we can help each other, because we bring that understanding, and with support and care we can do that. So I think the healing needs to happen first, and when the healing needs to happen, we then need an ecosystem around us where we can access the opportunities we need to access. So we have to do both at the same time, the inner world and the outer world. But above everything, we have to build in self-belief in women, because again, like you said, that is the source of everything. That is the source of the person. You bring that self-belief to business. You bring that self-belief to parenting. You bring it to everything. So yes, all the inner world, the outer world, it needs to move in tandem. And right now we could do with a little bit of everything. But what we are trying to mobilize and tell women is that you don't have to wait for someone to bring you that inside, or someone to bring you that outside part. You can actually mobilize yourself, start helping each other, and all that you want for yourself is going to some miraculous ways start moving towards you and finding its way towards you. And that's what we've seen happening, that we create these little groups of women, and and sort of say, okay, no negativity, all positivity, just see what you can come up with when you try and help each other.
Yeah.
And it is just so beautiful. It's just flowing like water. And I think just more of that. We need to stand up for ourselves first before we ask the world to stand up for us. We need to respect ourselves first before we ask others to do that for us, because frankly, others are going to just simply give us whatever they see that we are. If you hold yourself with respect, the other person will have to sort of hold you in respect, because the other person sees that line and sees those boundaries.
Yes.
And it's very important to have that self-belief. And without money, without economic independence, that self-belief, it's not going to sustain itself. So yes, the self-belief is going to come from the soul, the power of the soul, but it's going to find its feet, or it's going to find the blood, if you would, kind of add to the soul bit, through economic independence and economic empowerment. And so it's absolutely important that we have that. And if you look at issues around the world like trafficking, or, which is like a really big issue, it also happens because it's an unequal economic world as well. There are people who have the money and you don't have it, and therefore you are, and also you have, psychological issues of either being neglected or being the unwanted girl in the family. There are all sorts of mindsets issues. You're not sent to school, your brother's sent to school. You are, the last one to eat in the home. All sorts of things make you feel unwanted. And whenever you get the attention of people who are, people who are out there to exploit you, you're very vulnerable and you're drawn in, and then you are sucked into this whole cycle where it's almost impossible to get out. And there are books written on it. There's a lot of pain and suffering out there, and I think healing each other and reaching out to each other, and like our mission is to connect all the women of the world in sisterhood. I think things like that, the more we have help with that, and we can easily do that. I can connect you to Anna can connect me to someone else, someone else can connect me to someone. We can do this. We can hold hands and simply create a chain of change around us, by us, and embrace ourselves.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Harbeen, for all your insight into the subject of women's economic progress and development. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Anna. I really, really enjoyed myself talking to you, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Right. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Harbeen Arora, speaker, educationist, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and businesswoman, for sharing her expertise in how we can develop and foster empowerment for women today. I'm Anna Letitia Cook, and you've been listening to us at Women Up Radio. I'd also like to thank Meryl Guzel and Laura Martinez of UN Women's Empower Women for all the wonderful work that they do to advance the case for women's